Hello Internet, hello War of the Visions fans. Today I'm going to be talking about Lotus Mage Fina. At least that's what I'm calling her. You know what? I should check. Okay, looks like there's some cool QOL coming, but no announcement for Fina yet. So I'm just going to call her Lotus Mage Fina because this is what we called that version in global FFBE. I remember when she came out. Excellent unit. One of the best healers in the game for a long time, and she could be in this version here too. She's definitely going to be a slightly better unit than a lot of other healers. And before I get into talking about, her, how she's doing, anything like that, except to say that currently there's only about 550 of her in the wild in JP's guild battle system right now. That is in comparison to Cypher, who is running just over 1,000, just under 1,000 on defense, but just over 1,000 on offense and over 1,000 on average. But I think that there's a couple of things that have to be discussed with this character, especially for me, because I made a video about a year ago that talked about how both casters and ranged units have certain big drawbacks. In common, they tend to be a little bit squishier, and for casters, there's a lot of ways to interrupt casting or to stop casting entirely. There's a lot of things that just don't affect physical units at all that can be absolutely debilitating, like silence, and there's all sorts of ways to interrupt casts with status effects. And there's Reflect, there's Runic Shield, there's a lot of ways to really mess with a person's ability to cast. So you would hope that the abilities are stronger for it. And when we had characters like Black Rose Helena, like the first UR Helena, this was certainly worth the trade-offs, right? And one of the things that Magic units, I think, have always kind of appreciated in this game, and maybe capitalized the best on right before June came out, as they, from that video started to improve many of the ways I had, suggested. They're now a lot sturdier. They now do a lot more things. There's a lot less issues with casting time in general. But they're really good units, so they were, until something came out that just countered them very effectively. So we're back in a place in the meta where Magic is so not prepared for, because everything is largely physical, that Magic teams ironically can sneak in wins that way because no one's geared to fight them. That gives them kind of an inherent strategical advantage. And in addition to that, having like one mage on your team can be really powerful. So from there, I want to get into a class match video that I've been saving for you guys. And so in this video, I was matched up against Urza Rage. Well, I'm thinking of as Urza Ranged in this video. That uni may seem like an off choice, and honestly, it's probably the worst part of this team, but when you see it all come together, it's hard to be completely mad at it. I mean, I did feel some Urza Rage, honestly, but Gilgamesh is very good at being one of those characters that can sneak in this kind of damage very easily and just be really brutal by the virtue of the fact that most people are going to have to gear to deal with the physical components of his team. It's still, most of the team is physical. You're still better off gearing physically, which means that Gilgamesh is always going to do a little bit more damage than his counterparts. And I think this is pretty strong right now, but Gilgamesh really shows us the way that Fina might be used, and that both of these classes might get better. Because the issues with ranged units are typically that they don't necessarily do as much with their attacks. They can be a little bit hard to build for having really high damage output, although this has been easier at certain times than others. But also, they tend to be really squishy once you finally get to them, and because of their range, they can often skip one of their buff turns. And this puts them in a really awkward situation where people will get to them too fast if they don't spend their second turns usually on damage, But in doing so, they end up going into the fight weaker than their counterparts. So there's a lot of ways that you could fix things like this. You could just increase their damage. You could just get rid of casting times. You could entirely. You could make both classes of units tougher. But Uni doesn't have to be tough here for this strategy to win. And I really wish we'd started mobilizing forward if I had really understood what was about to happen. Because the way that you improve ranged units, I think, and the way that they're running to now is both strong synergies with non-ranged units by using this type of follow-up damage effect like Gilgamesh will be using here. But also, because Gilgamesh is who he is, that can carry a lot with it. Gilgamesh himself can give courage ceiling on hit to himself. And that means his follow-up attacks, especially when you execute them at range like this, are basically going to reverse all the big drawbacks of the ceiling type damage. If you can, guaranteed, lay it on their entire team well before they're near you, it has a much more dramatically good chances of going off and really affecting the fight in a way that's going to benefit you instead of being maybe. Fina herself can seal enemies' abilities to debuff you, which really does a wide range of things and changes a whole lot of dynamics. And now, look, it's ridiculous. Crazy damage. Urza Rage, congrats to you. This is a really good build and a really good piloting of it in manual. You did a great job here. Keen Blade just fucking rubs it in. Yeah, let's get another Uni turn in. FFS. But I think that changes like this, and Fina being both a magical and a ranged character, I think that makes her potentially better if she can hit people, you know? And her heals seem really good, so hopefully she opens with some damage, some debuff ceiling, maybe even if you're pairing her with Gilgamesh. I mean, like, look, Fina would definitely be a better pick here than Uni, and it would allow both of them to do so much with Seeking Plume in addition to their attack. You've got one character who's sealing courage and another character who is sealing the debuffs. So this could just be really powerful and set up for kind of a range supremacy kind of thing. Now, one thing that you usually want to do is maybe reduce movement. There are ways of doing that with the producer's bow tie. Some ranged characters have this for themselves. And when we got the first of these, that would be Elia the Alabaster. It was just a mechanic that moved what she could do so much more into viability, that it became really important for her that she could do that. But over time, that just wasn't enough. So there are serious questions to whether or not either of these would really be able to keep up right now. But I think that Fina does both of these things well. So let's take a look at her. Increased casting time 200. That's not a lot. Single target resistance 10 is all right. HP 10. Get more decreased attack times. This is 400 in total between the two. 15 accuracy. This is one of my issues with like casters, is that it feels like so many of their upgrade slots go to dealing with their inherent disadvantage to time, you know, and it really keeps them from getting certain other things that might have been better there. 2 range, I think that's probably important for her to run. Spirit penetration 40 is good. Accuracy 25, also helpful. It's going to be 40 accuracy when combined with the stuff we just talked about. Single target resistance and agility sounds really good. Healing power and decreased chance of being targeted, also tactically really good. Initial AP and extra magic damage, I don't think is the way to go. And you can decrease your casting time by another 200 while increasing your magic, which could be the way to go. This would come close to making things happen in 1 tick, which is pretty fast, but not instant, importantly. And then the other red mage one I would also skip. I think this Winter Roth's main job, and it's really good. It's going to be really good in here as well. So good single target heal that also comes with removing just a lot of different types of status effects. Note that a curse is not among these. She does have a way of dealing with curse, but this is not it. She can nullify curse for herself. If she, as a healer, were cursed and no one else was, she still wouldn't be able to heal them. Right? It's going to turn off her ability to heal them as well. Charm and Stop are interesting too. This isn't bad. This is a good little spread, especially like for right now, just being able to nullify curse on your healer is great. It's something that no other healer is doing, and it's just great. So she also has some anti-distance resistance. That's pretty cool. So she's going to win in range battles. People who can hit her early and fast aren't going to do as much damage as they usually would. So she might be able to waste their time instead of allowing them to take out a squishy healer from a range, which is something ranged units tend to do fairly well. Let's see. Let's go down to the full upgrades here. So, reduces damage taken 100% for 2 times for self. I think this is amazing. If she... I mean, first of all, I don't think anyone has a 2-hit Mirage barrier at this point. You know, this started with Lastwell. There's some other characters, mainly Ice, that have this, but she can do it twice, which is pretty awesome. Now, I think we can check, actually. I would still expect that this character is very squishy, because she is at an intersection of 2 very squishy things. But that being said, while her HP is pretty poor, her magic is, wow, amazing. Speed, highest we've seen, 70. I think maybe there's a 71 in the game, but no, I think 70 is the highest. Dexterity and luck aren't amazing. She has a good base accuracy though, so we saw with her kind of like required passive and her Dream Awakening and all of that, she would have 40 base accuracy. This would get her up to 69. Nice. That is actually a really significant amount to have before you start equipping, because you could easily equip that up to over 100, and that could be pretty good for you. Furthermore, she resists Blind and Berserk. A little bit of Pierce resistance. Her resistances are actually pretty low. We would usually expect units to have way more in the way of resistance than this. Pretty significant downside. Like when you average these out, she only has plus 10 resistance, period. And this just is not the average. Like we see characters with far more than that in their kit these days. So she should be hitting pretty hard, and this is going to keep her from getting knocked out super early, which is quite powerful for her. She should be incredibly durable because of this. Also, 25 spirit for allies. She has to be included in the cross or the plus, but that doesn't mean it has to be centered around her like a lot of buddy buffs are. So this is a very forgiving pattern for a buddy buff. AoE resistance 25 for those allies. All of this is for 4 turns, which is great. Debuff effect weakening 20 for 4 turns for allies. That's going to be helpful. All the buffs will be at 80% efficacy because of this. A lot of newer units have some measure of this in their kit or in their build anyway, so this could build that up even further too. She gets auto-revive, and when she is auto-revived, something CT for self, 300 CT, so that's about a third of a turn upon being revived. Not bad. Not bad is an understatement. This part alone is ridiculous. Especially if you can find someone who can protect barriers. This is pretty ridiculous. This is begging to be broken, but if not broken, it's pretty broken itself. I hope that sentence made sense. It was made of words, I promise. Alright, so here's the big heal, or one of the big heals. We have kind of a Cura level mod. Now, this being kind of a lower mod that we've seen on a lot of newer characters might be a little bit troubling to you, but with a base 900 plus magic, this character is still going to heal quite well. Healing is based on your magic stat, which is why a lot of supportive characters tend to have the biggest magic stats, even though they're not necessarily offensive powerhouses. That's usually for other reasons. This is also going to get Protect and Shell. I think these are really important effects right now. They've just been ones that don't have as much counterplay, or the counterplay has been sporadic, and a lot of the counterplay also hasn't been super recent. There's a lot of hate for a lot of ways of resisting damage in the game. I mean, I talked about barrier destruction earlier. That's almost a requirement in a team build. Somebody should have it, just for characters like this. But, being able to remove Protect and Shell are relatively uncommon. Forecast for this too. So just a lot of sustain in this character, in just this one skill. Then we have this. This is going to be a range skill. So just imagine with her range +2, this is going to be reaching to the edge of this map. Having that extra range is really going to be important for this skill, and there aren't a lot of other attacking skills in her kit, or at least we haven't seen one in her main kit. This is pretty much it. It's basically her Sparkle Shower, if you're familiar with the original Fina. We're also not getting a terribly high modifier here. This is distinctly medium level damage. So if she does have any real damage coming in her kit, it's going to be coming from other stuff. So in addition to that small damage, it's also going to decrease CT by 25%, which is pretty significant. Like, it's always going to be less than 250, essentially, which is a little bit unfortunate, but that's okay. It's not bad. Could have been worse, I guess. It's just going to have a very small effect on people who've just taken their turn, for instance, whereas other ways of doing this could have actually pushed that person back even further. The part that isn't translated here, this is that it has debuff ceiling. Nothing else has debuff ceiling, and it's, I think, going to give it to her for a number of turns. That's how, or apply it to her attacks for a number of turns. Which is kind of interesting, but another issue that you're probably running into here with her main kit is there are no other attacks, if that's the case. But also just putting it on this one attack, I don't think is allowing this attack to do enough, and it needs to do more. This could be good. Not affected by range, and there could be some good stuff here as well. I really like this sub-job, but looking at the last skill, we have Full Life. Full Life is always great. It's always going to make any unit better. I mean, think about it this way, like, you get, what skill could be better than getting like a unit back in mint condition, basically? It gives you an extra character on the field, essentially, and that's why it's always been strategically very, very powerful, and enough to make even a lot of units that might not be all that great otherwise very good as well. This is an interesting skill. It is dark modifier damage. It's also not affected by range, as I mentioned earlier. This is closer to being a high damage thing in her kit. This still isn't like as high as a lot of modern units, so don't really imagine that 900 base magic is going to do a whole lot for her being a high damage unit. But this is essentially a more ranged version of Dark Fina's Dystopia. It is a 2-hit stop inducer, so that can be pretty powerful. This is also interesting. It's a Dispel skill. Dispels a lot of things, even quicken some. Oh, it nullifies. Nullifying haste and CT up. Probably the two more important things here. Again, it does a lot of stuff. It's a very full dispel in addition to those things. However, I usually don't like skills like this. I don't think this will really find much use out of certain niches, maybe if you're hunting a very specific team. Also, the problem here is that most characters get a lot of their damage modifiers from Fina, for instance, is for a lot of different reasons going to have a lot of light attack up, but no dark attack up. So this is kind of missing a hidden modifier that would make it more powerful. So even at 185, it's not going to be as strong of a 185 as a skill like this will be. So with that being said, let's go to my favorite part of her sub-jobs. Winter Ralph is just a really, really strong character, even at 70 cost, because of this job. So I'm really happy to see it again here. In the sub-job, agility and magic, especially for like a more magically based team, well, the single target. So agility and magic, so it's going to make her, for Fina really, it's going to make her a better healer. Although this is really where you're bringing in the damage into her kit. So maybe this would also be used for offense. And then we have the new style of AoE resistance as well, by 35%, so that's pretty strong as well. Reduces counter chance by 100%, that's okay. It's a pretty weak skill, but it's alright. Restore HP in a plus shape at the same level as like a Cura. So increases slash and magic resistance for units affected. So it's like a hyper Cura with resistances. And then another way of inflicting stop and immobilize. So this is also in a cross shape pattern. Like I was saying with her main sub-job, this is going to do more damage despite having the same modifier because it is a light skill. Now you could potentially violate someone's weakness with dark in a way that you couldn't with light, and that might push the damage up. But that's significantly unlikely. It's not going to have as much of an effect as light attack up usually has in increasing your light damage. This skill still benefits from that. It also throws immobilize into the mix. 25% chance in either case. So it's pretty strong. But it's also much closer range. It's also not a chaining skill. So it seems like that this might be the skill that they kind of ran with, and Dystopia too. But this is Dystopia anyways. This is Dystopia in a main job. Now sub-job. Decrease single target resistance 20 for 3 turns before dealing damage. This has really good range. Again, nothing in this sub-job is going to benefit from her range too. To her heals? It's actually an interesting question. She is a bow-based healer. It seems as though they do not. This does, though. And this also doesn't. So, no doubt. So, just this... I mean, if you really want her to use that, and it seems like it would be strong... Sure. The rest of this isn't bad. But if that's really the only thing it's increasing the range for, like, is this... If you remove that, because of how niche it is in her kit, honestly, is this still a better passive than some of these other things? I'm not sure. That's a little oofy. Feel a bit of a oof there. Okay, so single target resistance down, 165 mod. This might hit kind of hard. And then sequence. Oh, this is the one that allows them to absorb HP on their next turn, but also gives defense and spirit penetration of 40. And it does it for you too. Again, well, I mean, in this sub-job, she does have things, but yeah, this is kind of pushing Fina towards damage. Or at least giving her the capability of damage, right? I think rounds her out maybe a lot. There might actually be reasons that you wouldn't use this if you need her as a healer and she's just not healing. That could be lame. But I think she's this is a good set of skills. This is a pretty good set of skills for supporting her. It even supports her healing a little bit. Red Mage is pretty bad. This is an alright skill, but kind of bad. This is a Suna. Suna will be able to remove curse. As you'll note, not one of those is curse. So, since it says accept, that means it deals with curse. Cool, right? So she has another way of dealing with curse, potentially. So, what you all been waiting for, Limit Burst. Also not affected by range. They really could have made that range more useful for her. I'm kind of like, maybe it's just I'm having a long morning. But, Spell Curse for allies. This is just going to ensure that curse, the heal lands. 310 mod. This is going to be a huge heal. This is almost certainly going to take people to full HP, even from like courage. Especially with her high healing and base stats. And then it's going to allow them to reduce physical damage taken by 25% for 3 turns. That's all right. Really, the thing that makes this interesting is the Dispel Curse. In some ways, I'd rather have Sylvie's LB. There are other healing LBs that do slightly better things than this. However, none of them interact with Curse, and we are seeing that there are going to be more Curse characters coming. We have Ramada being the most recent, but also coming at the same time as this character, Veritas of the Frost. So maybe there are going to be more Curse characters coming, and if there are, if this becomes a significant part of the meta outside of just Sephiroth, or in addition to Sephiroth, especially if it happens quickly, this could make her a more and more important character. That being said, even with some of the fun that I think that you could have with, I'm actually, the range thing really annoys me. Like, right? Because this feels like a required thing for her. Because this is, while, no, my complaint is only that this is her only offensive skill in here. I wish she had another one that was affected by range. Because I really want to give this +2 range. I really, really want to give this +2 range. I want it to reach all the way to the edge of the map. Or the edge of this display. I want it to get that far away. But it feels like a big trade-off in a lot of ways to have it do that. Maybe that's just a little bit aggravating, but I do want to make the same case that I was trying to make with that earlier. With this skill, fire the skill off. Then, Gilgamesh, standing nearby, supports that with Seeking Plume, which heals him, damages everyone that her skill hits, because she doesn't have high damage, but he does. Both of them are mages, so both of them are going to be able to ignore how much defense you've put on your character, how much slash resistance you put on your character. It's not going to matter. And then that is also going to apply courage ceiling. So, or courage removal ceiling. So this is just going to be such a wombo combo. And this really is the type of dynamics, both interplay with non-ranged characters and what ranged characters need to be doing and adding to their skill set. It's just, it's almost hard to call her a ranged character in some ways when only one of her skills is ranged. It feels weird, but technically it is an excellent ranged skill. I can't complain. Let's look at teams. So you'll see the most used team here is Advent Children, Cloud, and Cypher. I'm seeing her used a lot on light teams, and that kind of makes sense. Light's been running with the healer for a while. so they're kind of used to it and know how to fit her in there. Also, more light synergy is cool. Looking at her key partners, we have Strategist Uldoa and Gilgamesh the Scourgebreaker. This is both her number 2 offensive team and her number 1 defensive team, and the best team that I tested. But she also worked pretty well with either of these characters independent of that. You don't see as much Strategist Uldoa necessarily, but Gilgamesh the Scourgebreaker is a very important partner for her. So is Advent Children Cloud and Helena the Black Rose. This is the team that came in 3rd on offense, as well as not listing on defense, unfortunately. But both of these characters do appear on a defensive team, and yeah, I mean, they both show up both ways. There are other good characters to pair her with, but as I said, she's mainly being used with light right now. So let's look at some of the teams. The least used team here was the strongest by far. This is Strategist Uldoa and Gilgamesh the Scourgebreaker. It was the number 1 on defense by a mile, but also number 2 on offense. So it's not even doing that poorly in offense. It did have one day that really let it down. Kind of 2. But still, very good team. Next, we have Helena, the Black Rose, and Shurika. So Shurika is going to be on a number of these teams as well. I'm not entirely sure I'd call her a key partner, even though looking at some of the more modern data, there are some newer teams that are popping out with Shurika that seem especially strong. But she's definitely one to keep in mind. I think this might be by the virtue of Shurika just being a better character. I think we've kind of hit a little bit of a recent drought in good characters. I mean, we've gotten a bunch of healers on the magic side, which is kind of unfortunate, as we don't really need them. And then we got a character who's meant to be a brawler that doesn't have courage or re-raise. I'm not saying that any of these characters are horrible. I'm just saying that, especially in a field that has been so diversified, early on looking at this data, I saw a bunch of outliers because all the characters that were being released were outliers. But now they built their own meta and they have other non-outliers to compete with. They are within norms now, and that is kind of normalizing the data as well. I think it'll be interesting to see where the numbers go when I cover Shurika, because it's possible that her numbers go straight back up, which means that she's kind of the next big thing. And I'll be sure to look into that sooner rather than later. Next is Advent Children Cloud and Cypher. This is actually the most popular team. It's fairly recent characters, light and dark synergy, although there's not a lot of that. There's only really one vision card that works for both. Because even in a lot of the multi-elemental vision cards, they tend to get sectioned into 2 different vision cards in most cases. Next, we have Gilgamesh the Scourgebreaker and Shurika. So this is just high and probably very fast magic damage, in that Fina is going to be laying on a lot of hurt with Seeking Plume added because of Gilgamesh, and then Shurika is just going to be able to do a lot of damage when she gets in range. The team seems to be a little bit shakier on offense, and it did have a kind of poor performance on defense early on, but it has seemed to at least solidify it on defense. This looks very good for defense. Advent Children Cloud and Dream the Spring Celestial, I think there's better things this team could do. This team shows up. These two show up with every new unit. Some massive amount of people are trying it out because they want to do something new. They want to play with the new characters, but there's not a new character that really works for this team. We haven't seen a new Greatsword character for a while. And yet, Greatsword is still probably the dominant archetype in the game right now. So it's really easy to try to fit literally anything into this team and see it do relatively well. And it did all right. It would have been 5th if there hadn't been a tie for 3rd place in points. Looking at the actual 5th place team, we have Advent Children Cloud and Gilgamesh the Scourgebreaker. Both units, I think, work really well with her. They don't necessarily make sense on a team together, but you can see that those synergies are strong enough that it definitely pulls this team all the way up to 5th. Lucio the Crystalborn and Cloud of Advent Children. So when I first looked at this data, Lucio the Crystalborn was doing a little bit better. He doesn't make sense off of the light teams, but there've just been better light characters released. I mean, this team actually does do better than Advent Children, Cloud, and Helena the Black Rose, which is a more common team. But I think it's trailing a little bit. I mean, they did end up tying for third on offense. So maybe you could say that Lucio the Crystalborn could be interchangeable with Helena the Black Rose. But the Cloud of Advent Children is still the most important here. But at the same time, just seeing what happened to the other Lucio team, which was definitely doing better in the data at a time, seeing it fall, it just makes me think that maybe this one might be next. Advent Children, Cloud, and Helena the Black Rose, another light synergy team, very strong. Third on offense, just kind of talked about that as well. Like, these teams were incredibly similar to each other. They were within a hair of actually tying on defense too. The thing that ended up deciding 6th and 7th was like a half a point on defense one day or less. So those two teams are incredibly close, but I think that Lucio might fall off a little bit faster maybe than Helena. Then we got A2 and Dream the Spring Celestial. Same admonishments that I gave for Advent Children, Cloud, and Dream the Spring Celestial, except that now there's no light unit at all. That doesn't make a ton of sense. Both these characters heal really well, so that doesn't make a ton of sense. And it really wasn't used that often either. The thing is, despite spiking the data, this team split the data. It is simultaneously the best team on offense and the worst team on defense, and in both cases by a pretty significant margin. So this team is almost certainly worth running, but only on offense. You can find something better to do for your defensive team. And then finally, in 9th place, not even used that much, and definitely falling off pretty considerably, the lowest ranked offense team, and I think maybe second lowest, second only to A2 and Joom on defense. So this team really didn't perform super well anywhere. It even had a 1 performance on defense, but it also had a 2.2, and it had a couple of 4s, but it also had a 2.6. Jeez. So, you know, it has its moments, but it is not consistent. And that inconsistency really pushed it to the back of the pack over time. Again, I think Lucio and Cloud, maybe because they can chain together in a way that Helena can't chain with these other units, maybe that's helping that team. But the version with Helena and Lucio, no Advent Children, Cloud, it's just not working. It's not working anywhere. You know, like, it's still doing relatively good. A concession they'll make in every one of these videos is that you do well with any of these teams. I picked them out of pages and pages and pages and pages of data on WOTV stats, and they're all doing pretty well. But you see these other 8 teams, they can all do better than this team very consistently. I mean, A2 and Dream the Spring Celestial, I wouldn't advise that team. I wouldn't recommend it. It's definitely 8th place for a reason. However, it does work on offense. I can't argue with the data. It's doing good, solid work. Can't judge. It feels like a meme team. I want to laugh at it. I want to make jokes about it, but its defensive performance is laughable. And I think that says that it's probably not going to do amazingly over time. But it works. Who am I to judge? So thank you so much for tuning in. That has been all I could possibly say about Lotus Mage Fina. So thank you so much for watching. Remember that the free-to-play option for YouTube is to like and subscribe and leave me a nice comment in the comment section as well. But also, thank you for doing all those things to help my channel. There is a link in the description if you want to do more, where you can either donate to the channel via Ko-fi or Patreon. You can also check out my books. Those are for sale. One of them is deeply discounted right now, so check that out. It's the hardcover version specifically that's on discount. And you can also check out other channels, other places I post content. I've been posting fairly regularly recently to a Spotify podcast that just talks about the world and everything in it. And it's a little bit more of just me trying to rationalize the world around me. But if you're into that kind of thing, if you'd be along for that kind of ride, I think the Spotify channel is a really great way to get into it all. So check me out there. And with all that being said, I'll see you in the next one.